do it now. Let's get into defensive line. Like I said, you don't like the word concern. That's fine, because you're right. Guys like Darrell Middleton and leaving off Aubrey Solomon kind of started coming into their own at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. Can they continue that success? I hope. I really hope so, because if you have any kind of semblance of pass rush, any kind of semblance of pressure, I feel like it sets up the rest of this defense to be great. I feel like it could separate the good from great.
Yeah, I mean, this position, it was a concern last year because you had so many question marks. You didn't really have any experience. Now, with most of these guys have a season under their belt. I think there's 6 or 7 guys that contributed a lot, and you return everybody. The only person you don't return is your coach at that position. Tracy Rocker is headed to South Carolina, and then Jimmy Brumbaugh took his spot. So,
which a lot of people like the hire, and he kind of made some news in the recruiting side pretty early on too.
Yeah, Tennessee lost the commitment, not Isaac Washington, as soon as Rocker headed to South Carolina. But Brumbaugh did a good job of just building that relationship with him, and he recommitted to Tennessee. So definitely like what you have in him.
We'll find out what he's made of on the field, because that's obviously the most important thing right now, immediately.
But with this group, it was a surprise last year. I mean, they really held their own, especially in SEC play. Now, the Georgia State BYU game, they were pretty bad. But they improved.
To be fair, was there a position group that was good in those 2 games?
There wasn't.
No,
and it could have been a lot of that. They just weren't lined up correctly because, when Daniel Batuli came back, it made the whole defense better. So that obviously had some impact. But this group coming into the season had some bad news. They didn't know if Audrey Solomon was going to be eligible, and then they lost Emmit Gooden to an ACL tear
in fall camp.
Yeah, so I mean, heading into the season, there was even more unknowns.
Right.
Then when we finally got to the season, Aubrey Solomon was deemed eligible, so that was big for that group.
Yeah.
And then Bumpus got a lot of playing time, like you said. Middleton, I think Emerson, Solomon, and Darrell Middleton was kind of the starters there,
right?
And then Garland, Butler, and Bumpus were kind of the guys behind them.
Yeah, and I thought Darrell Middleton was the biggest surprise of last year. Not that I mean, look at it; his sheer size alone should tell you he could be an SEC lineman. I just think there are a lot of questions coming out of community college. I think you're just unsure. I mean, you never know.
Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Exactly, and then they're only going to get so long in the system.
Yep.
So you're kind of hoping they figure it out sooner rather than later. And it took him 6-7 games to figure it out, but he did, and he played really well. I wouldn't even say that, because he had some key tackles in the Mississippi State game that I'm recalling right now. So caught on.
Was that the game that he got?
I think he got ejected. Yeah, I think he got ejected in that game. But had some key moments in it before he got ejected. I think in the second half, and then had to sit out at Alabama. So I guess the entire game. But like you said, the defensive line didn't play well against Georgia State. Georgia State dominated the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
But to be fair to that mistake, everybody played poorly. So hopefully they get off to a fast start. I assume Darrell Middleton's going to be a starter. I think with getting Emmit Gooden healthy, I think that's a guy you could expect to be starting there as well. And then my guy and someone just mentioned on YouTube, Savion Williams. He was for a community college guy. Again, it's a community college, you have some questions, but he was one of the better guys you expected to be better.
Right, yeah. He was a guy that they expected to make an impact and just did not for whatever reason. But Tennessee, they have 7 seniors this season.
Yeah.
So next year is last year was we don't have anybody with any experience. This year you have everybody with experience, and next year it's probably going to be a little bit of the same as last year, where you lose a lot of guys, have to replace them.
There are some freshmen that could make impacts, I guess, that should be coming in. But
yeah, and a lot of these guys, Emmit Gooden is probably the biggest name recruiting-wise. Other than, Aubrey Solomon was a big one. He's a former 5-star. But other than that, there wasn't a ton of... Greg Emerson had some concerns. He was one of the top players in Tennessee. when he came out of high school, but he just had some concerns with health
Right.
and conditioning and things like that.
Well, and you mentioned Aubrey Solomon, and not that he wasn't a big transfer news. He was.
Yeah.
But he was a 5-star at Michigan, and then after that, it's kind of it wasn't crazy news that he went to Tennessee. Nobody was really because I mean, and it was once he transferred from Michigan, he was going to Tennessee. He didn't spend time looking around or anything.
Right. It was a big get, but it definitely wasn't as big of a get as like a 5-star high school freshman.
Right. It was much different. Yeah.
But you have some newcomers in this. I won't start there. I'll go with the. So you have the 7 seniors. You have Emmit Gooden, Jaquan Blakely, who Blakely made the tackle with Daniel Patulli at the Kentucky game. So even him, that wasn't one of those 6 big contributors, but found his way on the field in a key moment.
That kind of felt like everybody outside of the starting 3. They were just. It was kind of by committee. It felt like.
Yeah, 100%. And with probably the lack of talent, I guess I don't want to say that, but the lack of like difference makers on that defensive line, you have to do it by committee.
Right.
So then you have Matthew Butler, who didn't start, but he was the most productive one. He had 45, led the defensive line in 45 tackles and had 2.5 sacks. Latrell Bumpus, Aubrey Solomon, Darrell Middleton, Savion Williams will all be seniors. Then you have John Mincy, who will be a junior. Then you have some sophomores, Greg Emerson, Karot Garland, who were part of that 6 that we talked about. Then you have redshirt freshman Elijah Simmons.
I hope
You see him a lot because you saw him at Kentucky. You saw him. I mean, they definitely utilized him in those 4 games.
How often are you going to find a 320, 330 plus
It's insane.
athletic anybody? I don't know if he can. We haven't seen enough of him. Nobody really knows unless you're inside the building, I think. And they may not even know yet because he's like you said, he didn't play a ton. So they may have some questions. But that's a guy I want to. I'm rooting for him. Junkyard Dog, I'm rooting for him.
Yeah. So let me ask you some questions, and you kind of answer them, and we'll kind of go back and forth.
Good luck.
So
I don't know if I can.
So who does Emmit Gooden? What spot does he take? Whose spot does he take?
He was in, I guess, over Aubrey. I guess before because he got eligible after Emmit Gooden got injured.
Right.
If we're going back to when Emmit Gooden was healthy.
Right.
I don't know. So the 3 guys that mainly started was Garland, Middleton, and Solomon, right?
No, it was Solomon, Middleton, and was it Emerson? Emerson.
I guess yeah. Okay. I don't know, man. That's a tough group to crack into. Like you said, that you have to assume Emmit Gooden gets in there.
Right. And I mean, the good thing about it, Matthew Butler didn't start.
Right.
But what, 4 or 5 games, 5 or 6 games?
Yeah.
And he was the most productive one. So it doesn't really matter if you start. But you like to think Emmit Gooden is probably the most talented defensive lineman on this roster.
Yeah, I think for the sake of argument, I'm going to go with he starts over Greg Emerson. For the sake of argument, the good news is you want your defensive line to be by committee. Yeah. You want those guys to be rolling in and out on downs, have guys available for 3rd down. So that is the good thing. But I think I would put him in if what we've seen is true. I think I put him in over Greg Emerson probably.
Yeah, and that's if he's 100% healthy, which
that too.
I think we've heard kind of everything saying that he is on track to be 100% come fall. Then, I mean, Matthew Butler.
Well, where do you put him? You can't skip out on this question. I know you're asking. You can't skip out on it.
I mean, I think it's you build around him, in my opinion. I think Darrell Middleton and Emmit Gooden, I think those are your 2 upside guys. So, maybe it's Solomon, Middleton, and Gooden.
Yeah.
Probably for me.
Okay.
And Matthew Butler, since he was the most productive one,
right.
Does he get a shot?
You would think, but
I mean, again, I think it's going to be a lot of that same committee.
Yeah, and you go back and look, and what downs was Matthew Butler more productive on? Because that probably matters.
Yeah,
things like that, and they're going to look at that and go at it. But yeah, I think I like him. I think I like those 3: Middleton, Solomon, and Gooden being on the field at the same time.
Also, is he going to get some games where he's suspended?
It's possible.
So
yeah,
that could be a.
So you could see him at least not start
for a couple games.
Right.
Yep. Yep, we'll see about that.
Tyler Hood, we'll get your question as soon as it's regarding the schedule. We'll get to it as soon as we're done with the defensive line preview.
Awesome.
So hang on with
get those questions in here. I'm on Facebook. Like Caleb said, he's on Twitter and YouTube. So drop those in there, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. Newcomers. Let's talk about them. So you have early enrollee Dominic Bailey, who comes from a prominent, one of the best high schools in the country. Mm-hmm. That's just loaded with college talent. So, I mean, his transition to probably that school to Tennessee is a lot different from probably Amari Thomas that's from Briarcrest to Tennessee.
Right. I got to imagine they like his size that he comes in at. He's not coming in under or overweight. For example, Elijah Simmons came in and before they saw him dunk a basketball, they wanted him to cut some weight. Mm-hmm. You've got guys that are depending on, they probably want them to. Mincy probably wanted him to up some weight, but he comes in at that good size. I gotta imagine they like that a lot. St. Francis, didn't they? I mean, they played a lot of top talent in the country. Yeah,
they're
right.
They're like a top 10 team in the country.
Yeah, so obviously anytime you go from high school to SEC, it's going to be a lot different. But I would imagine he's got a pretty good shot in terms of transition. I gotta imagine it won't be as difficult as some others. The
other guys you talked about. Elijah Simmons and his athleticism at that size. Then you have Amari Thomas, who is a really good basketball player. Played at one of the top programs in Tennessee for basketball. Also football as well. You have him, and then you have R.J. Perry, who is 6'6", 300 pounds, and looks like a basketball player. So I mean, you're adding in some like
I love the size.
Yeah, and then the athleticism. Darrell Middleton, perfect example. Like played a receiver at Powell his first couple years, and then transferred to Oak Ridge where he was All-State in basketball too. A lot of athleticism on that defensive roster.
I realize size is half the battle. I realize that, but you got to have the size to start though to have a starting ground.
I think the biggest. I think these. I don't know if those with the 7 seniors. I don't know if those 3 guys. I don't think they crack the starting lineup. I think that you'll see them contribute in probably those 4 games.
Which 3 guys is that? Sorry.
R.J. Perry, Amari Thomas, and Dominic Bailey.
The newcomers. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So I don't know if any of those kind of crack it. But I think they could later down the road. Get to SEC play if there's injuries and things happen. I think you could, and a lot of incoming freshmen, you see them it's kind of so fast going at once, but as the season goes on, it kind of slows down for them. They're able to comprehend what's going on.
You talked about for these newcomers, having 7 guys in front of you that pretty much all have plenty of experience. When you look at across the board what experience is, plenty of experience. It's going to be tough especially early on. But the good thing about defensive line is you're gonna have some injuries. It's part of the game. Yep. Part of playing in the trenches. You're gonna have some injuries. So who can step up and replace them? It's gonna be a by committee thing. You're gonna have different guys rolling in on different downs. Some guys are gonna kind of wait around for key downs. So they may be the number 2 guy, but they're not gonna go in on second down if we need to roll. If Tennessee needs to roll someone else in there. So it's not impossible as a freshman to play. I feel like defensive line's probably, as long as you come in and have the size on you and the meat on you, you probably have a really good shot of playing a little bit.
Yeah, and there's nobody on this defensive line that I'm like, yeah, he's far beyond anybody else. Like, it's not impossible that they can't surpass everybody on this roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exciting to see. Now that we talk about it, man, it's like anything in Tennessee football. I'll talk about it a little bit more. I get a little more excited. Get a little more excited. I feel more comfortable because there's just the pass rush, which I know is a lot of outside linebackers too, and we'll talk about that. And we talk about the linebacker group. I realize the pass rush has a lot to do with them as well, but it's also key on this defensive line. It's you got to have some guys that are able to create pressure, that are able to draw in offensive linemen where they can't just stay out on the outside guys. It's pass rush is big. You can't give up. If we play Mac Jones and he's able to pick us apart, if Mac Jones finishes the season as a top SEC quarterback, I will kill myself.
I saw one. I don't remember. I screenshot it because it would definitely be a stupidity is an epidemic. But somebody was like, Kyle Trask is going to be in the Heisman race, or not Kyle Trask, Mac Jones. Yes,
he probably will be. He plays for Alabama. He plays for one of the best teams in the country.
It's trash.
But we better not give. I mean, look at last year when I know we played him.
We
in his
better
first
put him
game.
out of the Heisman race.
Yeah, I know Tennessee played him. Not injury wise, guys. He's not Tua. We don't have to injure him to beat him. It's not that way. But I mean, he's just not impressive.
No, he's not.
Not impressive. I'm not saying he's not a decent quarterback. Is he an AJ McCarron? I don't even think he might not even be an AJ McCarron.
No, I don't think so. Not from what I saw last year.
We'll see.
But with this group, you talked about pass rush. I think that's going to be something they have to build upon. Is just getting after the quarterback with the loss of Darrell Taylor. Daniel Petulli had I think 5 sacks or so. So those are something you're going to have to make up with, and I think this defensive line has a perfect opportunity to solidify themselves as some pass rushers.
Right.
Not just guys to plug holes, guys that can get after the quarterback too.
Right. Absolutely.